Up next, we have Mark Field, who will be presenting on Your Customers Are Demanding That Your Business Be Sustainable. Mark is the founder and CEO of Prof Consulting Group, an award-winning international consulting group working across the food and grocery supply chains. Prof assists their clients with new market access and strategic procurement, in addition to running a dedicated ESG team specialising in human rights, animal welfare, sustainable packaging and environmental operations. Please welcome Mark to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be here. I'd like to thank Phil and the team for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. So, as Josh said, a little bit about myself to set context for what we're going to talk about now, but originally from the UK, to 25 years international food manufacturing, supplying into the major retailers and McDonald's and others. Wesfarmers bought Coles, as we all know, and I was one of the lucky people that said, was asked to come over and be part of the biggest retail transformation in probably my lifetime. During that time, working through the private label team across a number of initiatives, I had the privilege of really getting to understand Australian consumers. When I decided that I'd enjoyed my corporate career, now is the time to try and help food manufacturers really understand some of the advantages or opportunities that are there, both in the domestic market and the international market. I decided that was the time to launch Prof Consulting. We've been going now for 4 years, a team of 25, based between the UK, Australia, and we've got a small team in the US as well. And I always said that with the model I wanted to work with Prof Consulting, if clients asked us for it, we would build that into our model if it makes sense for them. Very early on in the life cycle of Prof, I was working with a private equity company, and they were saying, Mark, they said, we've just been in to pitch to a major retailer on a sustainable energy solution, and we didn't win the business based on our ESG performance. They said, we took our policy in, but we didn't win the business. And I think for me, that was probably one of those light bulb moments where you say, ESG was changing at pace overseas. I think we were a bit slower to it from an Australian perspective. But clients were saying, the retailers are asking us for it because customers are asking us for it, but we don't understand how to navigate that journey. So on the back of that, we committed and established an ESG team, which I'll talk to you a little bit more as we go through the slides. But I did it because our clients were asking us for it. And I truly believe that the reason you're here today is because your customers are asking you for it as well. So just covered that section there around Prof and what we're doing. But I think what I hope makes us different is that we are traditional consultants across that food and grocery space, which is where our expertise is. And we combine ESG into that same conversation so that we can give our clients both sides of the table. Because I think some of the challenges that you'll be facing as food manufacturers or grocery suppliers is you've got your growth strategy. How do you sell more products into which markets? And then in many cases, you're playing catch up because you say, okay, so we're going to launch this new brand into this market. What are we going to do from an ESG perspective? It becomes an afterthought, which makes it harder for you then to go back through your process, take out excess packaging, improve animal welfare standards. Whereas I really believe success, regardless of size of business, is around putting both agendas together. And ultimately it becomes a culture thing where we say, if we're going to develop new products, how do we combine that? The same way we look at profitability and sourcing of ingredients, how do we combine that with our ESG commitments? But I think it's also important to put it into perspective. An incredible video there that we saw just before I came up, and I know exactly what Josh means. You feel you should say something. But that's the global challenge that we all face. If we boil it down into what can we do to make a difference, there's some things that you can go back to your factories this afternoon and do, that you don't need great sustainability teams, you don't need great consultancy, but if you do, then I'd love to have a chat with you. But you can all go back and make a difference looking at things through a value lens and saying, if that's waste, can I reduce it? And if you can reduce it, how do you track it, monitor it and tell people? Because that's how you can start to drive the ESG agenda. And I think there's so much we can all do collectively to start the journey before we get into the great things and the global challenges that we see through the footage there. So let's talk a bit about today's consumer. I think that the consumer today is more inquisitive than they've ever been. We were talking earlier to some people here around the impact of things such as TikTok. The data points people look at now for their information is not the data points we looked at when we were kids. People are influenced by different things now, and it's important we understand how to reach our target audience, but also what are people talking about and what does that mean for our business. And I think success in this market is about delivering solutions for customers. So in far too many cases, we do something because we think it's a great idea. But actually, you've got to bring that consumer lens into it and say, okay, is this a solution for the consumer? Will the consumer understand it? And how's it going to deliver for them? And actually, walking around the exhibition outside yesterday, there's some fantastic packaging solutions out there that really make sense. And I think it's about saying, okay, how does that resonate with the customer? Is it delivering what we wanted? Because that's a route to success, the same as selling a product. So for me, it's about consumer connectivity. So I think for years, we've all talked about food traceability as an example. I think that narrative's changing, and I think it's about food transparency now. You go, well, what's really the difference? Well, I think with transparency, you want to understand the key stages of your process and what are the messages that you can pull out and share with consumers, because they're naturally inquisitive. Whereas traceability is just knowing where that product was at that point of time and how do you call it back on a Friday afternoon if you've got an issue. I think we can use transparency to our advantage because it enables us to tell the consumer, who we're trying to win more of their spend, the great work you're doing within your supply chain. So consumer fatigue. This was a totally new concept to me. Last year, I was fortunate enough to be in the US for a trade show in November. And a key part of that presentation over the trade show was around consumer fatigue. And actually, when you sit and think about it and you play it back in your mind, there's so much information. You pick up the paper, you see the bad news, you walk in the supermarket or your independence, and you're not allowed to buy as much mince or as much eggs as you want because of the restrictions. You've got the social pressure from your friends, you've got the pressure from your peer groups, you've got the pressure of inflation. There's so much going through our heads as consumers. I think we're all tired. So as you look to deliver solutions in that ESG space, how can you help me feel less tired? What can you do that takes some of that pressure off? So when I'm walking the store, I just feel good about what I'm buying, as opposed to be pressured about what I'm buying because of the impact on the environment. So I think we've got to make it easier for consumers. And I think consumers now are far more environmentally aware than they've ever been. I think it's something that, probably 99% of us in the room would now say that we're environmentally focused. Whereas not that long ago, it was a certain section of the population that was seen as being the people focused on the environment. I think we realise that we need to look after tomorrow's consumer today. But do consumers really understand ESG? I think, having the opportunity just to reflect on that video, there's some incredibly impactful things there. But I think at the moment, if you ask consumers, what do they really understand? They understand packaging, they understand food waste. I think they're beginning to understand carbon credits and the role of carbon in society. And I think that's almost enough for them, at the moment. And we can make a significant impact focusing on those areas. But I also think that there continues to be that focus on modern slavery. And I think that's the part there that consumers don't necessarily understand where it is and how it impacts their supply chain. But when they're shopping, they want to be able to shop with confidence and know they're not contributing to the growth of a business or a brand that's doing the wrong thing across their supply chain. So when you walk in the aisles or when you're online shopping, you want to be able to shop without having a confidence. You don't want to feel that people are watching you as you put stuff in your basket, or as the person in the old days, as you go across the till. You just want to be able to buy products where you love the brand and you're confident and you'll know you're doing the right thing. So I think that's a great opportunity for us to take that pressure away from consumers. We all just touched on TikTok as an example about the pressure of influencers. We're seeing some massive impacts in the market now where influencers have got a high level of following. And in some cases, people don't go back to check the detail. It's somebody said, so it must be true. And I think that's really important, particularly as we start to see a focus now on greenwashing. What can we say? What can we prove? What can we validate? But from the consumers we've spoken to and some of the market research that we've seen also, consumers understand that the major food companies have an influence across food and grocery and their input into the supply chain. We can really drive positive outcomes. So there's an expectation, I believe, from consumers that industry will lead change, in many cases ahead of regulation. Food waste and packaging waste, as we've talked about, consumers really understand that. If you do an online shop and the big box comes and arrives and you take out your food or you take out your item of clothing, you think about the number of consumers that live in small apartments now. I always say, well, when you take out the goods, you see what's left on the bench top. How do they get rid of that? So I think it's just a different lens now around how brands are perceived, and over-packaging is a major challenge for many of us. So ESG, is it a competitive advantage or a ticket to play? Probably 2 years ago, I would have said to you it's a competitive advantage. Do it so it makes you different from your competition. Do it so you win the business. Actually, what we're seeing more and more now in domestic and international markets is a prerequisite. It's a ticket to play. And I think many companies don't understand that yet. And I think that really has to accelerate. It's absolutely becoming a baseline requirement, not just in our own domestic market. The amount of surveys or information you need to provide when you're pitching now for significant business across the food sector is incredible. You won't get in to see a retailer unless you've got a strong ESG agenda. Only last week I was talking to a client, and it's obviously not fair to name the client, but they were being asked by the retailers now what's their ESG strategy for their own packaging, for their own brand. So we've gone through that, or we're into that cycle now for private label and how you're going to help deliver the brand commitments. But when the retailer starts saying to you, what are you doing with your brand? That's a whole new different game. But it's being driven by consumers. But it's about commitments, and it's about keeping those commitments in perspective to your business. It's about using that to help your team understand what does ESG mean within your environment? What should we commit to as a team? Now, some of those commitments you'll make publicly, some of those commitments you'll just make to yourselves as a team, saying this is what we're going to monitor, this is how we're going to track our progress, and this is where it's appropriate for us to report in. A number of brands now, you go onto their website and they've got their ESG strategy, they've got their ESG commitments and their ESG reporting. That's where it's going. And, that's what I would encourage you to think about for the great work you do in the ESG space. How are you communicating that to your customers? So we also run a recruitment business, again, across food and grocery. And what we see in that space now is employees are asking companies, what's your stance on ESG when they decide where to go and work? So, we are all aware of the impact of the shortage of good quality people now to come and fill a number of these roles. So having an effective ESG strategy that's right for your business is not good just for growing your sales. It's also good for retaining and attracting the best talent, which is where you need to be successful tomorrow. But I think as we focus on ESG, what we're also seeing is it's new brands that are coming to the market, very agile brands that are coming to the market and understanding what consumers want and saying, actually, how do I build that into a product? So, there's loads of examples, but here's just a couple I picked out. So upcycled, where you take an ingredient that's low value and then you make it into a healthy product, a premium product, something that really resonates with consumers for a product that might have gone to animal feed in the first instance, or a product that was going to be downgraded. So all very good to eat, but not the type of food that we're eating consistently. So you've got the chocolate chip cookies there, which are obviously doing really well. And this is one of my favorites here, the cauliflower crisp. You shop that aisle now and you see how much of the aisle in the supermarkets now is vegetable-based snacks as opposed to traditional potatoes. That ESG agenda, using product there that's surplus or product that is too big or too small for the retail market, and then bringing it into this category, really creating value, creating customer inspired products, but at the same time, it's helping reduce that food waste. So we're seeing great innovation. We're seeing agile brands that are really popping up all the way around us now, that are seeing the opportunity, saying, I've got a great idea. I can link it in with food waste and get some product into the market very quickly. But I think we're also seeing that change in interface now with consumers, where brands are really connecting and resonating with them. So if you're not connecting with your consumer group in that way, I'd really encourage you to sit back and say, what opportunities are you missing? And what do you need to do differently for long-term growth? So can I afford to be ESG focused? We're very lucky that we get to do some work at the big end of town with the major companies, but we also get to do a lot of work with growing businesses that are at that smaller end of town. And a number of them say, Mark, I can't afford to be distracted by ESG because I haven't got an ESG specialist. I haven't got a packaging technologist. I just need to focus on meeting my orders and growing my sales. And I would say to them, can you afford not to be involved in the ESG conversation? And turn the question back to them, because I think if you're really trying to grow your business in today's market, you can't afford not to be playing the ESG journey. But I think it's really important to bring that back to, for the scale of your business, for your product group, what does ESG mean to your environment, and how do you contribute to making that difference? So as we get towards the end of the presentation, if I leave you with a bit of energy and a bit of excitement to go back to your factories this afternoon or tomorrow and say, okay, how do we do something from an ESG perspective? In my experience, I'd say focused on waste. And what does that really mean? If you go back and you look at what's your food waste and what's your packaging waste, it will make you more efficient. Yeah, and it takes you on that ESG agenda. Yeah, what's coming off the conveyor belts, what's being wasted, what's being over processed. How do we reduce that down, improve your profitability, and at the same time contributing towards your ESG work? You look at packaging. I love walking around the supermarkets and looking at all the different varieties of packaging. You're still seeing examples of product that's overpacked. You're still seeing examples of stuff where there's a bag in a box, and so forth. It's about looking at that and saying, ultimately, as a business owner, that's costing me money. So if I can reduce that, I'm doing a great thing for the environment, and actually I'm reducing my cost as well, yeah? In an inflationary market, that's really important. So I would say go in with a commercial lens to deliver the ESG agenda, yeah? I think it's also, great, thank you. It's also about saving energy. So I was at a conference the end of last year in Melbourne, and they were saying, just simple things like making sure that when you finish your production, you switch your lights off. How many times do you go past a factory on a weekend, Saturday night, Sunday night, and you see the lights on? It's those type of things that you would do in your home. It's encouraging the team in the workplace to do the same things, because suddenly then you're reducing your energy usage. You're well on the agenda, yeah. And then understanding supply chains and opportunities, labour and transport. Only last week a client said to me, she just come off the phone with the distributor and he's still moving pallets around Australia with 12 boxes on one layer because it's one product, and then 10 boxes on the other layer. That's costing them a fortune. And in today's environment, they should be the easy wins for us. Yeah, you don't need an ESG team to come in and help you on that. But that's just looking at your costs and say, how do we do it smarter? And then going, actually, that's helping us deliver on the ESG agenda. So new market access. As you look at international markets, modern day slavery, environmental policies, and ethical accreditation are becoming increasingly important. If you're saying it, you've got to show it. And if you've got to prove it. That's becoming very clear now, and we're seeing more regulations coming internationally in that area, and that will only get stronger. It takes a lifetime to build consumer trust, but actually it just takes a few seconds to lose it. So getting started, a couple of quick examples here. If you look at packaging, yeah, and I'm a big fan of this, and you look at the logos on the back, and you go, does that really tell the customer what to do with this packaging? You've got the logo there with the 6 inside. That's actually telling you what the type of material is. It's not a recyclable logo. You can walk around and you can see lots of this and go, oh, it's recyclable. Actually, if you put the wrong product into the waste stream, you're doing into the recycling stream, you're doing more damage than good. So it's about, are we really being clear with consumers on what to do with this packaging, and asking for their support to help break products apart so they can be done properly or recycled properly. Then there's some great things around like the app now, where people are now saying, this is food waste we've got. It's still okay to eat, but it's short shelf life. How do you share that with the community? And then the focus on carbon. Very quick case study. I've got 2 slides left to go. So Tesco, standing in front of you, talking to WA about Tesco's, I must be mad, yeah? Actually, this is one of my favourite examples about ESG. Tesco's as a leading retailer, I think, are doing incredible things in the ESG space. But what they actually did is they looked at toilet rolls. And they decided if they wound their toilet rolls tighter, they could get more toilet rolls in their supply chain. And they took 17 lorries off the road every week. So not only have they become more efficient, they've given the customer more product, and they made a significant impact. So if I leave you with one message, you go back to your business and look at your supply chain efficiencies and say, what can you pack differently that saves you money and enables you to get more product into the market? But for me, that's a really impressive example of making a change that's really meaningful. There's a slide there just about our capabilities. So as I said, we've got a head of ESG that's come out of Europe, human rights, animal rights, sustainable foods, packaging, and ethical auditing. We've tried to build a team that have got the capability to handle any challenges across the ESG supply chain based on customer needs. There's a video link in the pack if the pack's being shared afterwards, which is where myself and one of my colleagues last year were invited to do an interview in Westminster, London, ahead of the Climate Change Week. And really it's about helping customers, such as yourself, understand how to start the journey. And there's a brochure that'll be on our website in a week's time. There's the links. Please feel free to download it and have a look. And thanks very much for the opportunity.